Welcome back to the Cordell and Cordell Virtual Town Hall. I'm Scott Trout, CEO and Managing Partner of Cordell and Cordell. And as we've been doing every week for the last 10 plus weeks, we're bringing you the latest of COVID-19 and how it affects divorce and all matters in family law for guys before, during, and after divorce. And particularly today, we're going to talk about the military because they bring a unique set of circumstances and facts that's maybe a little bit of a complication, and we wanted to bring some Cordell and Cordell guests and panelists to help navigate through those waters as it relates to military. As you know, Cordell and Cordell is the largest domestic relations law firm of its kind in the world, serving men in our 30th year. And if you want a consult and you need to talk to one of our attorneys, you can find us on the web at cordellcordell.com or 866-DADS-LAW. Keep in mind, as I start out each week, we talk about how this is not an attorney-client relationship and it shouldn't be taken as legal advice. As you know, each of your cases, circumstances, and facts differ and would certainly alter any discussion that we would have as it relates to your facts. So I would encourage you to find someone, find an attorney who just does family law, just like we do, but we represent men before, during, and after divorce. Keep in mind, we have the lightning round after this in the second part of our virtual town hall today. So if you want to ask a question of our panel live, you can do that by submitting that in the Q&A section. Give us your first name and the state, and then you'll have an opportunity to come on live, just to audio, and ask our panel that question, and we'll get you an answer. If you want a question just asked by me of our panel as the moderator, you can do that in the chat box. Again, just your first name and the state and your question. But keep in mind, if you want that ask that question live, you can do that in the Q&A section. Just let them know that you'd like to ask that live of our panel. Do that now so we can go ahead and queue you up and get you in line to have your questions answered by our panel. Otherwise, you can continue to send your questions not only now, but throughout the week to coronavirus.divorce@cordelllaw.com. Coronavirus.divorce@cordelllaw.com, where I will address those questions once each week during my daily podcast. If you haven't tuned into the daily podcast, I encourage you to do that. You can find that on the YouTube channel for Cordell Cordell, and you can find specific issues that we address with our Cordell attorneys throughout the country, including the UK, where we get a chance to talk to our solicitors, where we just discuss particular issues as it relates to guys in COVID-19. Again, get ready to submit your questions via the Q&A section. If you want to ask live, we'll get to that in the second half of our town hall today. So I want to now introduce to you our panel of Cordell and Cordell attorneys that we have joining us today to talk about military divorce and the unique circumstances and the facts that are presented and the strategies that need to be taken for guys that happen to be either active or reserve. Joining us in San Diego, California is Cassandra. Welcome.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Cassandra Lelick, and I am out of the San Diego office. I practice family law exclusively and have for over 10 years, and I'm also a 7-year military spouse myself.
Thanks, Cassandra. Let's go to Virginia Beach with Charles Hatley. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Charles Hatley. I'm licensed in Washington, D.C. and Virginia, and I'm down here in Virginia Beach just doing my best to try to provide advice to our military service members on how to best navigate this difficult time.
Thanks, Charles. As you can see, what we're bringing to you is attorneys from around the country that have some connections to military bases nearby. Let's go to Jamie Smith in Colorado Springs.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me. My name's Jamie Smith. I'm the litigation manager out of the Colorado Springs office, which is home to the Air Force Academy and several military installations. I've been practicing for over 12 years, and currently I've been with Cordell for about 5 years.
Thanks, Jamie. Let's go down to Austin, Texas with a partner of Cordell and Cordell, Kelly Burris.
Hi, Scott. I'm Kelly Burris. I'm a litigation partner with the firm. I've been practicing for about 20 years. I'm licensed in Texas and Oklahoma, and in Austin, we're smack dab into between two major military areas, so I've got a lot of clients. And I'm board certified in family law in the state of Texas.
Thanks, Kelly. Coming back from last week, we have Rex Paget in Indianapolis, just returning from his reserve duty.
Thank you, Scott. As you indicated, Indianapolis office here with Cordell and Cordell, and I've got 27 years in the Army National Guard, about 15 years of active duty, and as you indicated, just got back from a recent deployment. And one of my flight was one of the first ones to actually encounter the quarantine for the service members coming back from overseas. So a great topic today. I look forward to it.
Thanks, Rex. And then rounding out our panel of Cordell and Cordell attorneys, going to Miami, Florida. Welcome, Christina.
Thanks, Scott. My name is Christina Diaz. I'm out of the Miami, Florida office, and I've authored some articles for the dadsdivorce.com website.
Thanks, Christina. As we start each week, we talk about items in the news, and this week in particular, we just want to talk about military divorce and even modifications and enforcement rights and all the issues that military find themselves in, not only dealing with just the fact that they are in the military and the specific issues that they face for divorce, but now we have COVID-19 on top of that. It makes it even more complicated. But keep in mind, again, second half of our virtual town hall, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions live if you want via our Q&A. Do that right now so we can get you queued up, first name and your state, and let us know that you want to ask your question live of our panel. If not, I can go ahead and ask that question for you. Do that via the chat box. Same thing. First name and your state. That way I can try to get you to, if we have a member of our Cordell team on the panel today in your state, we can make sure we can assign that question to them. So now let's turn to the news of the week as it relates to military. Cassandra, I want to go to you in San Diego. There was an article about military divorce in the military.com website, just generally talking about what people in the military, active or reserve, should be thinking about when they're either facing divorce, going through divorce, or even perhaps they have post-divorce issues during this COVID pandemic. But first, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about California. We've talked about the status of the courts. What's going on in California with the court system? Are they open? Are they having hearings? Can guys file things right now in the California system?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so in San Diego specifically, we just started opening filings on Tuesday, which we have finally opened up for e-filings, which we've been waiting with bated breath to do. And so we kind of overloaded the system for the first couple of days, but now we're getting into the habit of it. What's going to start happening is that we're going to be doing Microsoft Teams hearings in San Diego County. Some of the other counties are doing Zoom. Some of the other counties are doing WebEx. Every county is trying to do their best. We're still not certain as to when trials will commence or evidentiary hearings because we still have an issue with the court and so many people being there. Our newest courthouse is 10 to 15 floors, and we have two to an elevator right now, and that just is not helpful for normal business. So we're still writing it out. We have a return to services mandate in San Diego where they're going to start returning to services, and in some of the other parts of the state we are getting in to be able to do regular hearings. And we are doing filings and emergency filings.
That's good that things are progressing as we kind of talk all across the state today. During my podcast, talk to our Nebraska attorney, where things have always seemed to be a little bit normal. They're a little bit reduced, and the delays are in days, not months like you would find, or even a year that you would find across the country. So that's good news coming out of California. So let's really turn to this article. We talk about military. They have the issue where they're deployed. They may not be in their home resident state. But it does, this article talks about, isn't it important for those in the military, active or reserve, to really begin prioritizing and strategizing and setting some goals if they're facing divorce right now?
Yeah, because they have a little bit of a different situation. And in California, we don't hold deployments against our service members. We have so many bases in San Diego between the Navy and the Marine bases that the trick for us is to finding somebody that knows military law, because sometimes we have to remind the judges and gently nudge them to remind them that there are statutes and case law that show that specifically deployments cannot be used against our service members to say, well, you weren't around. And that happens a lot where the other party says, you're just an absentee father because you're on deployment. Well, that's the case law says that that's not the case. You're not an absentee father. You're doing your duty to your country, and it should not be used against you. What should be counted is the time that you're spending and the effort you put in when you're home and you're not on orders from the government to be anywhere else.
Yeah, it's critical. We have good questions in our daily podcast. We've had questions in this town hall about it. I know we'll address those later on in the second half of our segment. Again, the lightning round, submit your questions now via the Q&A if you want to ask those of our panel. First name and your state, get yourself in the queue. Now, we talk about this article, particularly one of the issues that comes about, Cassandra, really is property, meaning that if you have both parties living on base and they wind up divorced, it creates a whole host of issues where the spouse now has to find housing off base, right?
Yeah, because in California, the spouse isn't entitled to the military housing once they're divorced. And so there's a lot of support issues that we have to look at. And each branch has their own mandates as to, if there's no court order, what support should be. And so what we do is, because we know, and this is what we do a lot, is that we know which branch has which mandate. So we can decide if we'd rather have our clients pay the mandate from the branch, or whether we need to get into court and get a court order, because that's going to be less and cause less issues for our clients. So we really have to make sure that we have all these issues in mind, especially when you're filing. There is a certain case you have to quote in your filing or your response to a divorce filing that can protect our clients from having to split their retirement under California case law. So what it's called is making sure that we can tell the court, hey, our client is here only because they have military service here. They're ordered to be here, and therefore California doesn't have jurisdiction over them. And you can't plead those at any other time. So I've had to try to fix that on a lot of cases, because people just don't know that. It's very important to make sure that the attorney you're picking has the experience in these issues, because you can't unring that bell.
Yeah, and really, you mentioned dividing pensions and also retirement in the military, which is very particular. It's not like run-of-the-mill divorces where you have, a general, each one sets their own standard. That's something that you want, when you find an attorney, they better know what they're doing in dividing military pension and retirement, right?
Yeah, because there's a difference between your military retirement, there's a difference between pension, there's a difference between your TSP, and there's also a difference between instead of taking your pension, taking it as a disability pension. So there's a lot of tweaks that you have to know, because you take your disability pension, it is no longer taxable, and there's upsides to that. And then there's ways that we use case law and federal law to say, hey, maybe the other spouse shouldn't get any of it, because now we've changed its character. So it's really important to make sure that you're on top of what all of these different issues mean and what they mean to this particular service member.
Yeah. So let's go to the next article. Charles, I want to turn to you out in Virginia. We want to talk about how COVID-19 is really affecting military families, because aside of the divorce, there are all kinds of issues that this article points out, coming from thenation.com. But first, Charles, tell us what's going on in Virginia, what's going on with the court system. We always want to know, guys want to know, can we file? Are we going to have a hearing? Are they hearing emergency orders? What's going on?
In Virginia, we are starting to reopen slowly. The last order that came out of our Supreme Court basically told us to go ahead and get hearings back on track, because we are so far behind. The courts are having hearings on electronic platforms like Zoom or WebEx, and they're also starting to do the in-person meetings, so long as we're able to practice our social distancing rules. So right now, there is no reason why we can't continue to move forward. We can't continue to file things when it is necessary to help the clients out, and especially in these family situations, to help get progress moving forward.
Yeah. In this article, it points out, when we have this pandemic, we have our military, it's having longer training days. It's creating childcare issues, isn't it, for guys that may be separated and they don't know what to do?
It absolutely is. And, when you have longer training days and when school's out, you have to find, what are we going to do with our children? How are we going to continue their education and make sure that they're well taken care of as well? And right now at the CDCs, the Center for Development of Children, the essential personnel are getting priority at those centers. So if you talk to your command, there are outlets for that in order to be able to get the assistance that you need, so that your children are taken care of during these longer days and while school is out, and many other daycare center options may not be available.
What I thought was unique when reading through this article is that we all may complain about the stay-at-home order and how restrictive it is. Depends on where you live. Obviously, there are points around the country that are more open. But in fact, it seems like the stay-at-home base orders are more restrictive than the general orders, aren't they?
In many bases, they are. And what they're trying to do is confine any issues that they may have to base, so it doesn't spread out to the wider population. One of the interesting things that I recently read was the Air Force did a spot study and found the rate of infection on their bases was a less rate than what we see in the general population. And that was very interesting to read. I was surprised by that, but it's something that we can use moving forward, because what some people are saying is, well, you're going off to work, you're going off to this installation, and there may be this rate of infection there, and you need to be distanced from your child for that reason. And now we can point to statistics from the Air Force specifically that says, no, that's not true.
Yeah. Jamie, I'm going to go to you in this article out in Colorado. in the Springs there. And I think, a staggering number, 1.3 million active duty members are affected by this because they're either waiting to be redeployed or relocated. And there's all kinds of health issues or health avenues for them, isn't there? There's ways for them to go seek help, isn't there?
That's right, Scott. The number of service members that are affected can't be overstated. And the big issue is when you have a lot of service members that are coming back from deployment or who suffer from PTSD and other long-term mental health conditions related to their service, they need to continue their mental health treatment. And it's really hard for them to do that right now with the pandemic due to social distancing. A lot of mental health facilities are not offering normal services. The big thing about service members that do therapy is group mental health therapy is supposed to be really beneficial. And that's one thing that the article talked about was the support that person-to-person therapy can provide is just missing right now. So it does have an impact on service members and especially their family who are having to come in and try to provide that support.
I think one thing that stood out with this article, as you look at all the issues that military face, whether they're considering divorce, in the middle of it, or post-divorce, is that they need to seek the counsel of an attorney to go through these issues. Because one thing that really I was just not aware of is the DoD travel restriction for our military. What is that and what's going on and how does it affect them?
Yeah, right now in Colorado specifically, the DoD has a 40-mile radius travel restriction for service members. What that means is until the stay-at-home order is lifted, service members can't travel outside 40 miles unless they get permission and it's pre-approved. And so the reason that that is so problematic and the reason that means that they need legal advice is if it interferes with their current custody plan. A lot of service members may have to drive further than 40 miles to meet their ex halfway and exchange their children. And now they're not able to do that. And it can impact their parenting time if mother isn't willing to come to them. And we are also hearing reports that some service members are being required to use their paid leave to go outside that 40-mile radius, which they already have, limited time available anyhow. So it is definitely impacting the day-to-day interactions that dads have, with their children. And the impact really is, remains to be seen.
I mean, I think the point here is that there's resources. We've talked about that. There's help. You just need to reach out to an attorney and obviously have those discussions, because even more importantly, we talk about how unemployment is affecting the general population. We're now over 40 million unemployment claims in total. We're settling around over 21, 22 million. But for upcoming relocations for service members, they need to have their support modification ready if they're going to get if their pay is affected, right?
Absolutely. The big issue with relocations is it can change the BAH, or the basic area housing, that the government pays to a service member. And that amount is going to be based on where they will be stationed. And so if they have a relocation order that's pending that may go into effect soon once the COVID pandemic gets resolved, they need to go ahead and get their ducks in a row. They need to have an attorney ready to file the paperwork when they know that they're going to be relocated, because if that BAH is reduced because the cost of living in their new location changes, that can impact their child support. And because modifications take a while, the sooner the better.
Yeah. Kelly, I want to go to you with the Seattle Times article that really talks about financial planning issues for those facing divorce or post-divorce, pre-divorce, but that really runs the gambit across military and the general population for both. And military shouldn't overlook those types of things in the planning aspects. But first, kind of update us. It's been a while since you've been on the panel. Update us what's going on in Texas and the court system.
Well, it's a little wild, wild west out here. It's really, most of the courts are trying to open up and they're trying to allow for Zoom type hearings, all kinds of things. But in most cases, it's a county by county basis as to how they're doing and what they're doing procedurally. And in some cases, it's court by court. We even had a jury trial attempted. I think it mistried, but in Collin County up near Dallas, one of the judges up there tried a jury trial via Zoom. So some courts are opening up to in-person hearings. I'm hearing in June, and then others are waiting and just doing Zoom trials. I recently had a hearing via Zoom. So, you know, the courts are functioning, the courts are working. It's just a matter as to how that's going to occur, and you kind of have to know which court you're going to be in and which county. But we're moving on, and we're filing cases and getting stuff done.
Yeah, it's important because we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and I think particularly in North Carolina, there's guidelines and resources. So you really need to go to your county, go to the website and see what's going on with that court system. They may issue guidance, they'll issue guidelines. They may even talk, as you suggested, hey, they're accepting filings, they're having hearings, whether Zoom or in person. So I encourage everybody to do that. But the Seattle Times article really is interesting because there are many people around the country who were in the middle of the divorce. They were about ready to finalize it, or they're about ready to file. It talks about planning, just understanding, kind of getting ready for after divorce. But I guess it asks the question, why is it really important for guys watching right now? Why is it really important for them to proceed with filing or finalizing the case?
Well, I mean, financially and custody-wise, you know, with all of this going down, I think it's become even more important to have a court order. For example, the Texas Supreme Court has issued orders saying that any current court order related to custody has to be abided. You know, they have to abide by that. Now, if you don't have a court order, then there's, you know, you really don't have anything that you can enforce with respect to your kids. And because of the way that the court system is right now, it might be harder for you to get into court to get in order. So the quicker you can get on that, the better off you're going to be as far as custody and conservatorship. So with respect to custody, it's important to get in and get things done now. With respect to finances, if you're the obligor, if you're the moneyed party, if you're looking at the one being maybe having to pay child support, or if you know, the circumstances require it spousal maintenance, you know, unfortunately, I know finances are tight, but this is the best time to get those things set and those things done. You know, you don't want to be at your high getting child support and spousal maintenance set and division of marital assets done, and then have the bottom drop out on you and have to go back into court to have those things monitored or modified in any given case. So it's important to go ahead and get in financially. Like I said, it's, you know, yes, divorce is extremely, you know, for many cases, some is expensive. You know, it's not a cost anybody wants to have to do, but, you know, if it's possible financially, this is the best time to do it. And it's the best time to get your house in order overall, even if you're not planning on getting a divorce. This is a good time to make sure that you have estate planning done, to have, you know, get refinanced. There are many, many reasons that when the market is low, that's the best time to get your finances and your house in order.
Yeah, if something like this pandemic doesn't make everyone think about estate planning, and we use that in general, wills and trusts, and trying to make sure that you know where your things are going to go. I'm not sure what will motivate you to do it. So Rex, though, I want to talk to you, you know, as a member of the military. You know, there are questions about what are the resources available to the members in the military when they're thinking about financial planning, and they're thinking about how do I plan after the divorce, during the divorce. Kind of generally tell us what's available to service members.
Scott, most of the time they can go to their legal office, their SJA, so staff judge advocate, and they will actually do a will form for free. So, you know, those are nice resources available to our service members in regards to, you know, getting some of those estate planning documents. Most of the time they're very basic. They don't go into a whole lot of detail. But again, it's better to have something rather than nothing. There's also other resources out there that, you know, if they're financially struggling because maybe they were in a dual income situation and now they're not because of, you know, either the COVID or even just divorce in general, there's resources available, Military's one source, and others throughout the family resource centers on post that they're, you know, can engage in. They offer grants and other resources that can, you know, greatly assist them.
I think, you know, you pointing all this out is so critical to understand that when guys, particularly in the military, are thinking about divorce, thinking about something post-divorce, it's going to a law firm, finding an attorney who has familiarity or is even a member of the military, that way they can relate, you know, and I think that's so important, is to find it. And that's something that obviously, as you can all watch here, can tell, we have that at Cordell & Cordell. You can find us on the web at cordellcordell.com or contact us at 866-DADS-LAW. Christina, let me go to you real quickly because I want to get to the next segment before we get to our lightning round. The U.S. News had a report about co-parenting in this social distancing era. You know, we hear that word, that's going to stick with us for a while. But before we talk about the U.S. News article, just update us what's going on in the courts in Florida.
So Florida basically has been doing it a little bit differently. It's based county by county. Northern Florida has pretty much opened up maybe like 3 weeks ago, whereas Miami-Dade County and Broward County have been a little slow to open. They just started last week with phase 1. And this upcoming Friday, we should have a new administrative order from our Miami-Dade County Court as to courts reopening for in-person. Right now, we're still moving forward with filings and having hearings via Zoom.
So it's good to know, because as we're starting to see things loosen up a little bit, and we hear in the news every day, we're beginning to open up around the country. So let me talk about this U.S. News article, which is interesting, co-parenting and social distancing. And I think the first thing I would imagine you were going to tell guys watching right now is to have a discussion with your current spouse or your ex-spouse to try to reach some sort of agreement on co-parenting, right?
Yes. I first start with that discussion. Obviously, the other parent may be concerned about the child contracting COVID. So make sure to let the other parent know that you're concerned as well, but it's obviously the best interest of the child, and it's not about that parent and what they want. Try to be flexible, not be demanding, and most importantly, document your communications with that other parent, whether it's by email or text message. Those messages are going to be vastly important to you if you do have to seek legal action.
Yeah, I think it's important, as you mentioned, have that compromise, try to get a conversation going, document, as you said, we've been saying that for 11 weeks, document every conversation. But ultimately, it's not to suggest, right, that guys should shy away from filing an emergency order. If they can't reach a compromise, they still have that right to do it, and they should, shouldn't they?
Yes, of course. You can seek an attorney to go ahead and file that emergency motion for you. Different courts and different jurisdictions may have administrative orders that address how this emergency motion has to get filed, what facts need to be stated in there. And of course, you want to make sure that you have all that information in your motion so that you have the best chance of getting that emergency order for you.
So keep in mind that you can ask your questions live in our lightning round coming up here in the second half of our virtual town hall. Do that right now via the Q&A section. Give them your first name and the state in which you reside, and then you can tell them you want to ask the question of our panel, and you're going to get answers. If you just want me to read that question, submit that via the chat box. Same thing. Give me your first name and the state so I can try to give it to one of our panel members if we have one in your state and get you the best answer that we can. You can do that via the chat box. So we're going to get to our general topics in the part of this virtual town hall now, but we'll come right back after this quick break.
Even in the toughest of times, there are usually opportunities for relief. Many husbands and dads listening now are struggling to stay current on alimony and child support orders. You should know that this crisis may allow you to modify your support obligations, but time is of the essence. If you're a guy needing help right now, not someday when things are back to normal, call us at Cordell & Cordell. This is what we do.
So welcome back. Rex, I want to go to you. I know last week we talked a little bit about the status of the courts in Indiana, and they varied state to state or county to county, but give us an update. I know a week later, anything new up in Indiana with regards to access to the court system?
No, still, again, Indiana's been on the e-filing system for several years now. All 92 counties allow e-filing, so there's been no issues with at least being able to push forward some documentation to the courts. I was listening to Christina a couple of minutes ago, and she was talking about filing an emergency matter. And of course, what we consider, and sometimes our clients consider emergencies, judges don't. And so they're the ultimate deciders of what they believe is a emergency. Although we want to put as many facts in, it can't be stated enough, the documentation piece to support that, where people are pushing back, not willing to agree on things, etc. But with again, nothing really has changed. The counties, each one still working on their own Friday seems to be the day that new information comes out about the next phase. And so tomorrow, the next phase for like Marion County is opening back up a little bit more, and we'll get some more details coming out then.
And you mentioned early on when we talked in the news segment, you just come back from deployment yourself. The interesting thing is you experienced a quarantine. We wanted you to just talk about your experience and how guys in the military right now can kind of hear from you, having gone through some of these issues, particularly regarding the quarantine. And then you can talk a little bit about the travel restrictions. I know we alluded to that as it related to Colorado, but you can talk about that as well.
Yeah, Scott. So again, I was quarantined. I was one of the first flights to come back. So I was 14 days stuck in let's just say a quarter square mile of property with a barracks, and they brought us food, etc. So very, very isolated in that means. And that's a time, most of us have been gone for 9 months, hadn't seen our families, and they're ready to see their children. So there's an uncertainty. And then if you have a party on the other end who now wants to use the COVID as an excuse to withhold your child, you may, have those experiences, etc. But get ahead of that early. As soon as you get back, you can start filing, because oftentimes when you're deployed, you're covered under the Civil Service Relief Act. And so, people can't necessarily perform service on you and get things rolling. But with what we're experiencing and seeing is there are some certain delays. And so the sooner you file, the better in regards to certain things. But I experienced dads having that difficulty reaching out to their children because the other party just didn't want to help facilitate, or they just weren't as open to that communication. Our courts, again, the enforceability of the original agreement is still there. They have opened it up to where if the parties can agree in writing, that's enforceable, even though it's not signed off by the court. So certainly some leeway for different parties to come to those agreements, make things happen to the benefit of everybody. So we definitely want to see our clients doing the right thing.
Cassandra, let me go to you on this issue and how the pandemic's affecting the military, especially actions that are pending. How is deployment affecting the timing and the procedure for the military if they're filed, and what's going on? And I guess, how does that come into play?
So the deployments don't hurt us at all when you have an attorney, because your attorney is working on your behalf here for you. Whereas, as Rex mentioned, there is the Service Member Relief Act, and that says that some things can't happen while you're gone. But a lot of times you want them to happen while you're gone. You don't want to wait for another court date. And if you can't be there via chat or Zoom or telephone, your attorney can appear on your behalf. But I've done a lot of hearings where my clients were sent on deployments, but we already had a court date, and it wasn't in their best interest to not move forward, because then you're waiting even longer. So without an attorney, you're kind of stuck on some things because you can't act as quickly as you need to. Whereas when you have an attorney, you can file right away. We can do your hearings for you. We can push things along while you're gone. And so that's what's been really nice. And in San Diego, most of our judges, since we do have such a large military population, are cognizant of this, and they don't let the games be played. They don't have an issue where the other spouse is saying, oh, well, you're going to be on deployment, you can't watch the children. Well, you can have somebody else watch the children if you're on, different military orders, or if you're doing things in the field because you've been ordered to. So we have a lot of cushion here for military members to make sure that we're protecting them.
Hey, Jamie, up in the Springs in Colorado, I want to go to you. Update everyone on what's going on in Colorado. I don't think we've heard from one of our attorneys in Colorado in terms in a while on what's happening with the court system there. And then I want to talk a little bit about our veterans.
Sure. The good thing about Colorado is there has not been a significant backlog or change to divorce filings, especially as it relates to service members. The primary reason is we have 6, military bases in the state. The majority of clients, majority of people getting divorced are either active duty or retired or veterans. And so we've also been doing e-filing in the state for many years now. And so luckily, we're still able to do business business as usual. The court has done a really good job of immediately moving to a lot of virtual platforms to do hearings and mediation. Just last week, I wrapped up a 8-hour-long trial. It was all on WebEx. We had exhibits, witnesses. It was just like in the courtroom, and everything's running pretty smoothly. The issue, though, is because there are so many current uncertainties about, what happens when I have to relocate, or what happens if, my ex isn't complying with the court order and not meeting me halfway to see my child or whatnot, because that creates a lot of uncertainty. These people are needing more legal advice and needing to get their foot in the door, because certain things that they never could have predicted, before this pandemic, are now occurring, and their current parenting plan may not account for certain issues like this. And so that's why we are seeing an increase in retains, and an increase in people just saying, what do I do here? There's no precedent here, but luckily our courts have been very on top of it, and we're able to get pretty swift resolutions.
Christina, there's a Fox News article about the unemployment rate as it relates to veterans. And if you dig through those unemployment numbers, that article is suggesting that veterans have a substantial high unemployment rate right now. And I guess that just begs the question, the veterans should be really thinking about filing right now if they have support orders that they just can't afford, right?
That's right, Scott. The numbers rose drastically in April for veterans specifically, and it's mainly because of the jobs sectors that they are involved in: manufacturing, self-employment. So right now would be the perfect time to go ahead and get your modifications in, because if there is going to be a backlog in the courts, you want to make sure that you're first in line to get that modification heard.
There's all kinds of issues, mental health, considerations that veterans need to address. And a lot of people think when they hear the word shelter in place, closed, is the VA still offering the benefits? I think they got some money from the CARES Act to try to increase some, even telehealth for veterans. Isn't that still available to them?
Yes, that's right. The VA did receive some funding for this, and they're really pushing it towards that area to get veterans the services that they need.
Hey,
Scott, on that topic,
yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Sorry, yeah. So I actually had that experience while we were in quarantine. We were doing telehealth, so we always have to go through a physical health assessment, et cetera, when you're leaving a deployment, et cetera. And so we did that virtually with a healthcare provider at some point. So they called us, went through a series of questions. They were offering some video conferencing with that as well. So those resources are out there. And then earlier you asked also during my segment about the travel policy and distance, et cetera. And so like Charles spoke about earlier as well, some, and each base is different. So some are 40, some are 50. Fort Campbell, which is close here to Indiana, is a 50-mile radius. And again, so that is affecting some of our fathers in regards to them being able to travel halfway to meet, to pick up the child. And again, our recommendations are to try to work it out amongst each other. Maybe the other party brings the child all the way there, and then you will return them all the way. So, so you're still traveling the same amount of distance. It's halfway times 2. So those resources are available.
I think it's key. And the point is don't settle for just the pandemic and these travel restrictions affecting your rights. Again, compromise, reach out to an attorney, create a strategy, a plan to take, these things and help enforce your rights and enjoy the time that you're ordered to have, or try to get the custody that you're entitled to, even if it's pre-divorce. So it's important to just consult with an attorney, as we're all suggesting here. Hey, Charles, I wanted to kind of reach out to you. We talk continually about the effect of COVID-19 on guys facing divorce. And I guess the question is how is enforcement of spousal support and child support, being affected during deployment for military?
The enforcement part has always been difficult. During deployment, there is the Civil Relief Act, which doesn't allow anybody to bring a suit against a service member during deployment. And then compounding enforcement issues is the lack of access to the courts right now. Like here in Virginia, the courts were closed down. However, the courts did carve out a special docket to allow people to come to the court for help when support wasn't being paid. Conversely, that was not afforded to people who were looking for the reduction in support. People who had lost their income, like the veterans who maybe have a reduction in income, that was not being afforded to them to seek the reduction in support. However, the state does allow you to go back to the date of filing. So even though a court date was not available, if you filed, the court would go back to the date of filing. And now, we're pretty much open, like I said, back for business. So enforcement of support's not being paid, we can easily go after that now. For reductions in support, the hearings are happening and relief is being offered on that front.
So I assume that this, the health crisis, this pandemic is not affecting substantially, at least where you are, military guys' ability to proceed in their case and pursue their rights and enforce them?
Not at all. One of the biggest things that we were covering was more the unknown. People were coming to us not understanding exactly how things were working, and we wanted to get that information out, saying, you don't have to sit back and wait. You don't have to continue to be deprived of your rights. We can start to move forward, and we can start that process of getting you the relief that you're looking for.
Kelly, down in Texas, we talked about this for a number of weeks, whether it's military or not. I assume, we've got, again, every Thursday we get more bad news about unemployment. We had another 2 million plus to the rolls of those who have sought unemployment benefits over these 10 plus 11 weeks now. I assume you're going to support the same thing, that it's a good time to think about child support and spousal support obligations, whether or not you can modify it, because guys are questioning, can they make these payments? They don't know where the money is going to come from.
It absolutely is. I mean, and as Charles was mentioning, I think most states have some kind of retroactive support if the filing, to time of filing. So even if you can't get into court immediately, don't let that discourage you from trying to get some relief, because there's always that retroactive relief. And if you, in Texas, if you don't get something on file, you can't get that. So the court can't go back and say, well, 6 months ago before you filed, you lost your job, and so we're going to forgive that. But the judges absolutely will do it. And can consider it on from date of filing. Additionally, I'm here the judges are being pretty open about stating that they're open to people coming in and getting some relief for child support if they've lost their job. We were in a recent Austin Bar Association thing, and the judges made a specific point of saying that people would get relief if they sought it on child support.
It's interesting as we roll out of this the worst part so far to date, and states are starting to open up. I caught myself, getting on my phone, going to this, an app, Southwest Airlines. Where can I go? I want to get out of the house. I want to go somewhere. I guess the question for guys, and maybe the recommendation is, should they think twice before they go somewhere, particularly things that have made the news? Here in Missouri, Lake of the Ozarks, there was a giant congregation of people. You go to the beaches in California. Should they be thinking twice before traveling and how it'll affect their case?
Absolutely. The courts do tend to enforce the possession and access schedules, but at the same time, you have to be concerned because the judges have a lot of discretion. And while one judge might not think it's a big deal, another judge might think it's a very big deal. So you don't want, I would caution any voluntary travel and maybe wait on that beach vacation until next year, especially if you're getting ready to go through a divorce or you have gone through one. Unless you've laid out a plan and you've documented a plan out to your ex or the person that you're currently divorcing to say exactly what you're doing, how you're planning to keep the child safe, if it's a small amount of people that you're going to be around, and make sure that they have agreement in writing, some kind of documentation saying that they think that's okay. Absent that, that beach vacation that you were desperate to take may end up costing you 5 times that amount in attorney's fees if you're not careful. Even if the judge ultimately thinks it's okay, the amount of money it's going to cost on a modification, you might want to think twice about it.
And I think conversely, for guys watching right now, you can enforce the same thing on your spouse or ex-spouse. We talked about this probably 5 weeks ago, where Gwen Stefani picked up and went to Oklahoma, or we've got people going to Hawaii. When you're looking, there are pockets around the country that have mandatory quarantines when you arrive and then when you're returning. So you've got to be really careful. You can use that and impose that on your spouse as well, especially when you're looking to enforce your rights and looking out for the best interests of your children. So we're going to get to that lightning round now. We'll leave ourselves a little bit of time. Continue to submit your questions right now via the Q&A section. If you'd like to ask your question of our panel live, if you'd rather have me read that question, submit it in the chat box. I'll go ahead and read that, and make sure to put your first name only and the state in which you are. We'll be right back with our lightning round right after this quick break.
For some dads out there, the coronavirus pandemic has become a pretext to limit access to their children. Other dads have been pushed out of key decisions affecting their children's lives. If you're one of those dads, Cordell & Cordell is here for you, as always, but with expanded services. We can meet you in person or by video conference on weekdays, evenings, or weekends. Our goal is to step up our service to meet your needs now.
All right, welcome back. It's time for our lightning round where we're going to go quickly through your submitted online questions. We want to get to those. Remember, you can continue to do that right now via the Q&A or the chat box if you have a question you want answered. Otherwise, you can submit that via email at coronavirus.divorce@cordelllaw.com, and I'll address those during my daily podcast once each week. So let's go to our first one out of California. Cassandra, since you're in California, I'm going to toss this one to you, but let's listen.
Due to COVID-19, my wife has requested an extension to the deadline to refinance our home where she's living from June 30th of this year to July 31st of 2021. Is this a reasonable request? We live in Sacramento County, California. Thank you.
So Cassandra, the question really is apparently there's a judgment. Spouse, wife was ordered to refinance the home by June of this year. Obviously the pandemic hit. I don't think it's stopped refinancing, but she wants to extend it by a year and a month. Is that reasonable?
I would say no, and my counter to that would be if you want to wait a whole another year, then I'm going to want interest on the money that I'm not getting from the refinance from the asset that is supposed to be mine. At this point, he's going to be out a year and a day from the money, which is probably a significant amount of money when you're refinancing a house to pay out the other person. It's not a small chunk of change. And so if she wants to wait, then I think the option is you can have a couple months, or you can pay me the interest, the statutory interest in California, which is 10% on the money you're holding, because that's my investment. And he shouldn't take that as, a year and a day is not reasonable. A month, couple months, maybe 6 months, but a year is not a reasonable amount. As you pointed out, refinances are still going through. I have plenty of clients refinancing right now to pay out their spouses or get paid out themselves. So no, that is not reasonable, but you can use it as a negotiating tactic if you don't really need the money right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's unreasonable to go out that far. I think a couple months, engage in a documented conversation, show that you're trying to be reasonable. I think she should provide reasonable steps or efforts and show that she's done it to try to secure it. And if she can't, then show proof that she can't get it because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's keep on going on. We've got one from Arizona. Jamie, I'm going to toss this to you from Arizona.
So I have a judge who obviously plays golf with the opposing counsel, and they rule against me no matter what. They say I have PTSD based on a psychologist who's never even talked to me, and I'm never going to get to see my kids again. So I look at the Constitution, and it says that my right to a jury in these proceedings is either preserved or may not be violated. And if you can't provide me a jury, why can't you do that, and where does it say that?
So Jamie, before you answer, I'm curious what your thoughts are. I can tell you my thoughts. If you look at the Constitution, it does guarantee a right to a jury for criminal cases, and those are civil cases as well. When family law is typically a court of equity, and so therefore the Supreme Court has allowed each individual state to determine whether or not a jury trial should be had, and we know that Georgia and Texas allow it. Particularly, I'm licensed in Georgia, and I know Texas does it as well. And I think Texas, interestingly, is one of the few states by jury that you can determine elements of custody. You can't do that in Georgia. But Jamie, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The jury trial provision within the Constitution is for criminal cases. For civil cases, which all family law cases are, it is up to each state. Specifically in Colorado, where I practice, jury trials are not permitted for divorce or any sort of family law case. And yeah, there are a few handful of states around the country. I am not practiced or licensed in Arizona, so I'm unsure. My belief is they don't, but that is essentially why it sounds like this person is not getting a jury trial. But the fact of the matter is, typically, in my experience, sometimes it's better not to have a jury, because divorce is something that so many people have dealt with, and they're going to have their own very personal feelings about it that are going to be very hard for them to set aside if they were a juror. And so you want someone that can be objective and not use their personal bias against you. As far as what this person is saying about this mental health evaluation, it sounds to me that if this person has made a finding and hasn't actually met with the father needs to look into possibly maybe doing a rebuttal expert. I don't know of any case in Colorado where the court would look at, a rebuttal expert that has never met the person and found that they, were making an informed recommendation. So it sounds like perhaps maybe this father needs to get someone that can rebut the findings, that can actually meet with him, with all of the parties involved, do a full psychological testing and analysis to make a more informed recommendation to the court.
And I think you have to be careful asking for a jury trial based upon certain facts. When I used to do jury trial work early in my career, I've been doing family law for 7 years now. But the point is I think you have to be careful. If you've got a judge you think is biased, as the question alludes, because they golf, do I think it's inappropriate? Yes. You should talk to an attorney about filing a change of judge for cause. And you have nothing to lose at this point. If you're losing every step of the way, then file the change and see if you can get a different judge to rule on it and to talk about it, because judges are bound by rules of ethics and to avoid the appearance of impropriety. And that's the rule you want to cite. Obviously, golfing consistently, constantly with someone in an active matter looks improper, right? And may question whether or not their judgment is true to the law and the facts presented. So I encourage you to seek an attorney, somewhat different, obviously, and talk about a change of judge for cause, talk about your rights and what you can do. Obviously, you're preparing your case for appeal and continue to talk about that. So let's go to some submitted via chat. I'm going to turn this to Charles in Virginia, because this is coming from Virginia. Charles, the question from Andrew is, if you are already divorced and have a custody order in place, is the passage of time and age change of the children, both 2.5 years now are passed, both good reasons to for a change in circumstances if I want to file for a change in custody, where I have to prove a change first, obviously. So that's really the first part, and I'll go to a second part of that question. I guess it gets to, is time enough for a change in circumstances in Virginia?
As the question stated, you always have to prove a substantial material change in circumstance since the entry of the last order. Time can be one part if you could show that during that period of time some change has occurred which significantly impacts the children, which draws the court's attention to there must be a change in the custody and visitation order. When you have a child go from an infant, less than 1 year old to a 5-year-old, and that passage in time would absolutely be relevant for substantial material change. Moving is the same way. If moving from one school district to another school district, anything really that impacts the child is going to be considered for the first element, which is a substantial material change in circumstances.
And is COVID-19 another change? And Andrew's seeing his children less because sports are canceled. The question becomes, and I think, particularly in Missouri, it's a continuing. You have to show some sort of maybe permanency. So that's the question from Andrew finally.
That's a difficult question. We had a case out of Fairfax, Virginia, where the judge specifically said COVID-19 was a force majeure. And what that means is it was an unexpected event which nobody could have called for, and it's likely going to end. So when you're looking for a substantial material change, you're looking for something that it's not fleeting in its very nature. You're looking for something that's permanent. So while the virus may impact your ability to see your children doing sports and may impact your ability to see your children doing activities, what the court's going to be looking for is some permanency to that impact. And right now, we can't go to a court and say with any certainty that there is permanency to this impact. In fact, we hope there's not permanency to this impact. But what we could show likely is that the mother was not willing to be a co-parent with you when this event happened. And her lack of being a co-parent is maybe an element of substantial material change that we could use to show the court that you do deserve more time with your children after everything that's happened.
Kelly, I'm going to toss this to you from Tennessee. Eric in Tennessee says, my oldest daughter was emancipated this month, but the Child Support Services is telling me it will be 6 months with no accrual. I've sent all the information, including affidavit of income and graduation. I'd like to use the difference for her college tuition. Do I have to go to court to have it adjusted sooner?
It's really on a state-by-state basis. The Texas child support is run through the Office of Attorney General. So here we would just really try to pester them until they got it right. But if you have an order saying your child support terminates at a date certain, and you've proved that it's happened, or when she graduates, that's when your child support terminates, and you've done everything you need to do, then it shouldn't be necessary to file a modification or any kind of order. You already have an order. So it's really just probably just pestering the Attorney General or the whatever department in your state takes care of that to get it right. And probably what's happening is they're just backlogged through all of this, and they probably had some stay-at-home orders as well. And just like everybody else, they're just sort of backlogged. So I don't know that it would be necessary for you to go ahead and file another modification. Now, if you can get a hold of a human being in their office, then you might be able to narrow down exactly what it is you need. But try to talk to an attorney, not just a clerk there, because I've had situations where the clerks told me completely wrong information. So I'll call and say, well, look, you didn't process this order correctly. We need to fix this. And they'll say, no, you have to go get a new order. And I know that that's not correct. So, it is a little bit of a, beating your head against a wall. But if you're persistent and you follow up and try to get them to respond, hopefully you won't need any court intervention, but it really is a state-by-state situation. So you probably want to set up a consultation just to be sure that you don't need to take any court action.
Great. Let me toss this to you, Rex. This is Mark, lives in Tennessee. Tennessee, I guess he has 50-50 custody of the 3 kids. My job has extended his remote-only work for him through the end of the summer at least, so that'll continue on. Currently, during his ex-wife's week with the kids, he's been watching them while she works in her building. She keeps asking if they can just go to daycare instead, which she thinks is unnecessary. He can continue to watch them while she works, and that will greatly limit their risk rather than going to a daycare. What are your thoughts on if she keeps insisting they go to daycare?
So most of these things are controlled by a court order already, so if the court order says that children will attend daycare, then certainly, that's the enforceability part of it. They would need to look to try to resolve it. I've actually heard this question several times thus far, and there's no real true answer, because one judge may say, Dad's doing the right thing in this case, while the other judge may say, well, that's reasonable because you're saving money because they don't have to go to daycare, and you're reducing the risk of putting a child into that environment where there's multiple children coming in, and we just don't know all the backgrounds of all those different children and where they're going each day and all those different pieces. We hope and we anticipate that the daycares are doing all the CDC recommendations in regards to cleanliness and doing those things. But I actually just saw an article last night, or a news related story, where the children are still napping close, and they go out, in each individual class goes out and plays on the playground. So the children are interacting. So I think there's definitely some concerns from dads in regards to that. And there would be from myself as well if I was in that position. So I think he's really going to have to, look out to specifically Tennessee to see if there's anything that, especially in an emergency situation, that could be done if a compromise can't be reached.
Yeah. Let me get to another question here. I think this could be the last one. Christina, I'm going to send this to you. It's from Mike. Mike lives in Nebraska. His unemployment has been exhausted. Obviously, he's unemployed at the moment. He's currently on child support, but going back to court to reduce his child support. He's trying to do it himself. He went and printed all the forms. Is there anything else he should think that he needs to reduce his child support? And Christine, I'll toss that to you, other than the fact that I wouldn't recommend doing it pro se, especially trying to reduce or eliminate it. But Mike wants to know what else he should be thinking about.
I agree, Scott. You should not do this alone. You should definitely have an attorney help you, especially in a time like this where different jurisdictions, different courts have their administrative orders of what's necessary, what needs to be filed with your modification. So I definitely do not recommend that a party do this alone pro se. It really depends on your jurisdiction and where you're at as to whether you need to file something with your modification to prove your unemployment. I always tell my clients to document their efforts to find employment. So that's something that's very important right now. Even though places may not be hiring, still document your efforts to send out resumes and applying for jobs.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have for today. That concludes our virtual town hall for this week. Continue to join us each Thursday. We're going to continue to bring you the latest information and different topics and Cordell attorneys from around the country to talk about that and to answer your questions. For those of you that did submit questions that we couldn't get to today, we'll address those in our daily podcast once each week. You can continue to send in your questions to coronavirus.divorce@cordelllaw.com. Visit us on the web at cordellcordell.com or contact us at 866-DADS-LAW if you want to schedule a telephone, virtual, or in-person consultation where appropriate. Thanks to Lexicon for producing and assisting us with this virtual webinar. It's a legal technology and services company for law firms. Until next time, have a great week.